Hi, everybody. I am live with you today. So excited to be talking to you on this incredibly interesting subject of the Pazyryk burial mound. I, again, am relatively new to this YouTube streaming thing. Still a little bit, you know, not always sure I know how the software works and everything. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to very quickly open the stream on my phone to double check that whatever I am doing looks good on your viewers' screens because I don't really have a good idea what it looks like. Meanwhile, if you are here, um, and are watching with me, please let me know. Um, please let me know in the chat that you're here. Awesome. Yes, and now that I'm on my phone watching this, I can see that you are this does work. You can see both me and my screen. This is exactly what I want. This is perfect. Perfect. Please let me know in the chat if you are here. If there is a chat, there should be. Yes, Louisa is here. This is great. I am so happy to have viewers and just really excited to bring another interesting art history topic to you today. And even though I am more into um, fine art and probably um, very typical in the fact that painting is my favorite genre, or my favorite medium, I should say. Um, this particular story that has a lot to do with archaeology and applied art and talking about how people lived so long ago is very exciting. And I'm really just so tickled to share this with you. And so cool to see that people are watching me. Jaleel, hello. Happy to see you here. So, um, today's topic, Pazyryk burial mound, has something to do with the Hermitage and Russia, but really is broader than that and has to do with the culture, the magic culture that lived on the territory of the Altai region in modern Russia. But this region really borders with China and Mongolia as well. I have on my screen here for you the map of Altai region. You can see it here, sort of in the um, south, towards the southeastern part of Russia. And the one of the interesting things about this area is its climate. And honestly, its climate is the biggest reason, the biggest thing that makes this whole archaeological story so fascinating. So, um, the culture that we're going to be talking about with you today is now known with historians as Pazyryk culture. And this is a nomadic culture, really similar to the Scythian culture that existed on the territory of the Altai region, which you now see on your screens, again, bordering um, more than Russia, Mongolia, and China in the 5th century BC. And as I mentioned, people in the Pazyryk culture were nomads, and they had quite a clear hierarchy in their culture, and they had really interesting burial rituals. People in the Pazyryk culture were buried in burial mounds, also known as kurgans, Kurgan, kurgans. This is a word that was brought into the language. It's a Russian word, but now is more widely used in archaeology in general, in anthropology. What were kurgans? Kurgans, or burial mounds, were basically an basically a building that was put underground. Oftentimes, it would be a building made of wood with several chambers. It was several chambers connected together. There would be a burial chamber where the person who died is buried, but there would also be sometimes chambers for other things that could be available to that person in the afterlife, such as, for example, horses or some things, attributes of wealth, even modes of transportation, as we will find today. In Pazyryk culture, husbands and wives, men and women, were often buried together. However, women were not killed to be buried together with their husbands. No, and that often happened. They were buried together if they died at the same time. However, as we will later find out, horses were killed. Horses were sacrificed to be buried together with their owners, and we will see some interesting looking items that are connected with those burials. An interesting thing about the Altai region and the burial mounds has a lot to do with the climate, because in the Altai region, the winters are very severe. It gets very cold, and the springs are really wet. So, over the years, starting around the 5th century BC, the thing that would happen can be very well illustrated in the picture that you see on your screens right now. So, you can see here a burial mound with the main burial chamber located underground, and on top here you can see a picture of precipitation. So when it rains, the water would go underground and get collected in the burial chamber, and then when the winter starts, the water would freeze. However, because the burial chamber is located underground, plus has this big mound on top as well, in the spring and summertime the ice would not fully melt. And so, over the years and over the centuries, the water would just accumulate. The ice, sorry, would just accumulate in the burial chamber. And basically, it led to the fact that a lot of incredible artifacts that were left in these kurgans or burial mounds were pretty much intact. That's how we get to see the oldest carpet in the world. That's how we get to see other incredible things that consist of organic material. I will elaborate on that in a little bit. That's how these things that normally would perish by now stayed preserved. And that's what makes this Pazyryk culture so interesting to us. The story of this Pazyryk culture and the way it was discovered is very interesting as well. So there are several Pazyryk burial mounds, and they were all discovered throughout the 20th century. The first burial mound was discovered in 1929, so sort of in the very beginning of the Soviet history, when the Soviet Union didn't have a very big budget for archaeology, and the archaeologists that went to explore the Pazyryk burial mound were true heroes and really must have had a real adventurous spirit about them, because when they discovered some of the first artifacts in the first burial mound, they had to try to bring them back on horseback and on a very wonky little boat that would go across rivers. And they even had to leave some of the artifacts behind and trust some of the villagers that lived in the area that they would preserve those things for them. Luckily, they could be trusted. Luckily, they did save those artifacts, and now a lot of them are in the Hermitage, as you already know. And the people who explored these burial mounds are heroes in and of themselves, people of true passion for archaeology. For example, one of them, who discovered more than one burial mound, was also arrested in the 30s during Stalin's repressions, and was sent to build a very big waterway. Um, then he was released early, and he tried to get back to those archaeological sites in the Altai region, to keep exploring the wonderful items that could be found in there. However, the Soviet administration believed that this man should be needed elsewhere, and they forced him to get an education in hydraulics, and he became a hydraulic engineer after building that amazing waterway. And then he went to the Altai region as a hydraulic engineer, and was able to gain access to these burial mounds only through that, because he was there in the area. Also quite amazing. Anyway, these are some of the reasons why we will see these amazing items with you today. So without further ado, let me start showing you some of them, because they are quite incredible. So we are now in one of the rooms of the Hermitage Museum, the lesser known rooms, on the first floor on the museum. And some items that you get to see here, depending on how you choose to view them, might even feel quite disturbing, because I mentioned that horses would be buried together with their masters, and you can see basically a body of a horse. This was a huge horse. However, over the years, the horse body shrinked. So this horse would be buried together with one of the Pazyryk chiefs. And you can see a saddle that used to be buried together with the horse, and the size of this horse is incredible. So as I mentioned, the horses would be sacrificed right before the burial, and the horse would also wear this very interesting mask. This mask is a symbol of sacrifice. The mask makes the horse look like a deer because it has deer antlers, and at the same time it has wings sticking out of it, because the mask shows that the horse is being attacked by a raven, right? What a complicated symbol, but this is a symbol of sacrifice, right? So first, the horse would be wearing a mask that symbolized that it was being sacrificed, and then it was actually sacrificed to be buried together with the person. And in this room, you can see several other interesting items that were found in the first Pazyryk burial mound. For example, this big piece of fabric was actually a fur coat. And next to it, this long thing is a hat. People in Pazyryk culture would wear hats that looked like this. So both of these items would belong to a woman, actually. And this woman would also wear this hat and wool stockings. That again, it is incredible how well preserved they are. Again, this is 5th century BC, and a Nomadic culture. Some more beautiful stockings. You can see here, even a shirt that this woman would be wearing is preserved. Another interesting thing that people found in those burial mounds were shoes. I'm going to zoom in to these shoes to show you something interesting. As I zoom in and you look at the soles of the shoes right here, you can see that the soles themselves are not completely flat and not completely smooth. At the soles of the shoes, there are miniature glass beads. And I remember listening to a lecture about these little glass beads. The person who showed us around this part of the Hermitage was an incredibly good storyteller. And so when we were looking at these shoes, he asked us, why do you think someone would put glass beads at the soles of the shoes? And he also explained to us that these beads were incredibly fragile. At first we guessed maybe these beads could be used as something that could help you walk on ice, right? To make ice less slippery. This was one of the ideas. Somebody even suggested that as they belonged to a woman, they would leave traces on the snow or on the ground so her husband would know where she went. Both of these assumptions were completely wrong. The purpose of the beads was completely decorative. But when you think about it, how many people would see the soles of your shoes? Very few, right? And so he asked, well, why then would somebody, especially back in the 5th century, decorate something so elaborately, something that other people wouldn't even see? And here is the thing. First of all, this was a great sign of wealth. So only quite a wealthy person, a person of status, would be able to decorate something in their attire that other people would not be able to see. Second of all, how sure are we that other people would not be able to see the soles of other people's shoes? Actually, the fact that the soles of these shoes were decorated like that was great evidence of how the members of Pazyryk culture would sit. Probably they would sit on the floor, crisscross applesauce, and that's how other people would be able to see the soles of their shoes with the beads. So that was quite interesting. Just the little details that archaeologists look at that help them tell such little bits of culture and little traditions, which I think is incredible. And these are just the shoes. So they found the woman in the first Pazyryk burial mound and were able to reconstruct pretty much her whole attire. The shirt she was wearing, this piece of fabric on the left is actually a part of a skirt that she was wearing, along with the fur coat and the stockings and the hat and even the shoes, which is quite incredible. And because again of this interesting freezing process in the burial mounds, a lot of the organic material also got preserved. And the archaeologists were able to find things like human skin. Here is a whole face here. And this interesting exhibit in the showcase is actually the skin of someone's arm, or the arm of the person who was buried in there, which is also quite interesting. So before these burial mounds were fully frozen, the way that archaeologists found them in the 20th century, looters were able to get in there many, many centuries ago and steal some of the things, because these people were buried together with a lot of jewelry as well, and other things that could be useful to marauders. And these people who looted the burial mound many, many centuries ago cut up one of the bodies and left a whole piece of skin in there. And the archaeologists and the scientists were able to bring this patch of skin into their lab and straighten it up and see that the person in who was buried in this burial mound had tattoos. And you can see this right here. One of the chiefs had these tattoos, and they were able to even recreate the pattern of these tattoos. And that is what you can see here. This started a whole other interesting area of exploration with the Pazyryk burial mounds. We will talk a lot more about the tattoos that these people had. But one thing we know is that they did do embroidery, and they used quite fine needles for their embroidery. And probably the members of Pazyryk culture were using the same kind of needles for creating their beautiful tattoos. But the burial mound that is known for being probably the most interesting of all of them, what is known as the fifth Pazyryk burial mound. It was discovered in the 1930s, and in the Hermitage Museum, the fifth burial mound has its own separate exhibit room because of the amazing stuff that was found in there. So now I'm taking you to the room of the fifth Pazyryk burial mound, and I want to start here because in this room, you actually get to see the structure of a burial chamber, right? That I showed you earlier on one of my slides. So this chamber would be placed on the ground, and inside the chamber, the bodies would be buried, and other things that were buried together with the bodies would be stored. As you can see, the chamber was made out of large wooden logs, and the process used to put together the burial chamber was quite interesting. So first, the builders in the tribe would cut down the logs and put together the chamber above ground. Some archaeologists or some historians believed that the chamber could also be used for the funeral ceremonies. Some believed that it was only done for the building purposes, because once the chamber was built, those builders in the tribe would make special signs on the logs, and you can see them here. There are little tally marks that are made on each log, and it's believed that then they would take apart all of the logs, and then they would take them underground and rebuild the chamber anew underground. So what you would see inside the chamber would basically be the wooden sarcophagi inside which the people would be buried, and then the other objects, some of which we will see with you today, were buried in the chamber as well. If you look at the burying chamber right now, you can see a hole in there, and there is a purpose for that hole. Actually, it was not a window, believe it or not, but the holes that were made in the walls of the burial chamber were used to put another large wooden log through the holes. The large wooden log would be used to hold down the sarcophagi. They wanted to make sure, they knew somebody would come eventually to loot the burial chambers, and that large wooden log would hold the two sarcophagi closed and at least make it harder for possible looters to open at least the sarcophagi, right? And not disturb the bodies of the people buried inside. But as I said, we will talk about the bodies a little bit. But besides the bodies, there were a lot of other interesting objects that were found in this burial chamber. Among them, probably the largest and one of the most interesting objects is this piece here on the wall. I'm so tempted to call it a carpet, and people do call it a carpet sometimes, but this object really isn't a carpet. It is a big piece of fabric, a big piece of felt. Let's start it at that. But it was never, it was not used as a carpet. It was used probably as a tent. And how do we know that it was used as a tent? Together with this big piece of fabric, there were a couple of more objects that were found inside the burial mound. This long wooden log with holes in it, and large wooden sticks here, pretty much the size of the fabric itself. So there was some sort of a tent that the people in the Pazyryk culture used in the burial, but probably it was also used in the funeral service. Possibly the tent was built around the bodies during the funeral services, so that people could go inside the tent and say goodbye to those people. The pattern of this piece of fabric is quite interesting as well. First of all, on the outside, you can see these interesting looking mythological creatures. They have human heads and then bodies of a cheetah or a leopard, and then wings. The Hermitage curators call them griffins. Of course, we don't know if they were griffins really, but this is what they call them. And then the main subject of the pattern, so to say, the main story that is repeated in the pattern of this piece of fabric is quite interesting as well. So on the left, you can see this tall person wearing a dress and a crown. So this is probably a female figure and probably a goddess. This goddess is holding a tree. This could be interpreted as a tree of life. It could also be interpreted as a symbol of fertility. And towards the goddess is riding, this handsome man is riding. And you can see, if you look at his clothes, it looks somewhat similar to what we saw in the previous room. You can see the long stockings again, for example. And this man on a horse looks like a true warrior, and there certainly are attempts to make him look quite handsome with the mustache and the hair. Probably he is riding towards the goddess of fertility, or the goddess holding the tree of life, to get some sort of a gift from her. So ultimately, however you choose to read the pattern of this piece of fabric, this is definitely in some way an expression of the person buried in the burial mound getting some sort of a blessing from some sort of a female goddess or priestess, which is quite interesting. And in general, probably it has a lot to do with the afterlife, and ultimately there were other items that were found in this burial mound that also had a lot to do with the afterlife. Probably this next small item that I want to show you is my favorite item. I was the most fascinated when I saw it. And the item that I'm talking about is these so-called felt swans. Again, they are called swans by the Hermitage curators, but they are not really 100% swans. They are a combination mythological bird. If you look at it, it looks like the body of a swan, yet the tail, not sure what kind of bird the tail belongs to, and finally these beautiful long black wings. Took us all a while when we were learning about it to figure out what kind of bird do the wings belong to. And this is the explanation that was given to us, which I find really beautiful. So a swan in and of itself already is an interesting kind of bird, because this is a kind of bird that can live on water and on land, and yes, it can fly, but not as it can fly as well. So ultimately, this is a bird that can connect three different elements in it: the water, the land, and the sky. Go up into the sky. Um, the bird, the wings that this bird has, are believed by modern historians to be the wings of a vulture, because a vulture, in a way, is the kind of creature that takes human flesh and then takes it up into the sky, thus taking the human soul into the sky or to heaven as well. So ultimately, this is a creature, a mythological creature, that connects three different elements, plus can take human flesh and take it into the sky or into heaven. As for the shape of the tail, it's believed to be the shape known as a palmetta, or a little palm leaf, which could be a symbol of something divine, something sacred. So already two beautiful items made of fabric that we found and talked about, that were discovered in this burial mound. But incredibly, there was a lot more. For example, if this isn't a carpet, there actually was a carpet in the burial mound, and you can see this incredible carpet in front of you right now. And yes, this is what I promised to show you today. This is known as the oldest pile knot carpet in the world. And when I say pile knot carpet, I'm talking about the technology that is used to create a carpet, this kind of carpet. You can see the technology in the picture here. So ultimately, little threads are tied in knots and then cut to be on the same level. This particular technique is known as the Persian knot, and the carpet itself is believed to come from Persia. We don't know how exactly it made this way to the Altai region where the Pazyryk culture was residing. It could be a diplomatic gift, or just a present. It could be purchased there. We don't know for sure, but we definitely know that it should come from the Persian territories. And we can sort of see the pattern of the rug, and yeah, it is so different from that felt tent that we saw earlier, and that's another piece of evidence that it comes from a different area. Yes, we can see horsemen on horses, we can see bulls, we can see other mythological creatures and symbols, and ultimately, as believed by modern historians, the message behind the carpet also is very similar to the message carried by the felt tent. It is some sort of a blessing to the owner of the carpet. This was not the only piece that comes from Persia that was found in the burial mounds. You can see these two beautiful saddle covers, and this one is believed to come from Persia, and this one is actually believed to come from China, and is made of real silk, and you can see the beautiful silk pattern that is used for the decoration of the saddle cover. And historians believe that this was once some sort of a piece of clothing, maybe a robe of some kind, or a big skirt, or a big jacket that later was reused as a saddle cover. You can kind of tell by the way the pattern is arranged. So as you can see, this burial mound also had a lot to do with horses, and that is understandable because the people in the Pazyryk culture, as I mentioned earlier, they were nomads. Horses were incredibly important to them. That's why their horses were buried together with them. But they didn't always ride on horseback, and you can see another interesting piece of transportation that was found inside the same burial mound, this incredible carriage. The carriage, of course, was not in this shape when it was discovered inside the burial mound. It was put apart, and the archaeologists that found it had to put it back together. But an amazing thing about the carriage was that it was made without a single nail, because the pieces of wood could be just connected together. And so when they connected them, they were able to recreate this beautiful carriage. And it's believed that out of the two people that were buried inside the burial mound, there were a man and a woman. It's believed that the carriage actually belonged to a woman, and that the woman had quite a high status. She probably was a priestess, and this carriage probably was used for some sort of religious processes, or some sort of religious rituals. How did we figure that out? Well, first, the researchers looked at the wheels of the cart, and they noticed that um, the wheels did look a little bit worn. So it did look like the carriage had actually been used. However, when they looked at the way the carriage would be driven, they noticed that there is no real turning mechanism. So the only way to turn the carriage, if you were riding it, was to actually lift it up and move it around. Or turn the wheels around, and eventually the carriage would make quite a big circle. But then, yes, it would make a circle. Anyways, so that's how they realized that the carriage was indeed used, but it was not used to take long journeys. It was used for some sort of rituals where it wouldn't have to go very far. And it was then deduced that they were probably religious rituals, and ultimately the woman buried in there was a priestess. The woman's body is not available for us to see. However, we can talk about the man that was found inside the burial mound. And that conversation is quite interesting as well, because this is a mummy of a Pazyryk chief. Uh, he could have been a priest as well, and we know that he died approximately at the age of 50. And this is where the interesting tattoo research comes into place. If you probably remember, in the previous room, I showed you a patch of skin that had tattoos on it. If you look at this mummy, you can see that the skin has gone quite dark and dry, and it would be next to impossible to see if he had tattoos and what kind of tattoos he had, until the very end of the 20th century, where they used the modern technology of infrared light, and they were actually able to tell what kind of tattoos he had. And I have a picture for you, and that's the picture that is hanging next to the mummy, but you can't see very well, so I'm going to show you the picture on my screen, and explain what kind of tattoos did this man have, and if there is any sort of significance for these tattoos. So first of all, he had quite a fascinating creature that extended from his left shoulder all the way into his back. This is probably, and I said left shoulder for a reason, because probably it had something to do with the heart. Maybe the lion was guarding the heart. Maybe it was a symbol of courage in the heart. We don't know for sure, but there is definitely a connection there with this creature and his heart. You can see some other animals, panthers or horses in the arms, and deer as well on the arm. The leg here was covered with depictions of horses, which probably was a symbol of speed. Maybe this was a wish for him to run fast. We don't know for sure. But what I find the most fascinating are the thumb tattoos. Check it out. He had thumb tattoos, and it's believed that this was not that unusual and it was quite common. And on the thumbs, they had tattoos that looked like little roosters. And crazily enough, these thumb tattoos were used for thumb wars, because people in the Pazyryk culture would either do a little thumb war with their own two thumbs or play a thumb war with each other. And I guess when you have a rooster tattooed on your thumb, it looks a little bit more fun. Or at least this is what modern historians believe it to be. And on this wonderful cheerful game that we discovered that people in the Pazyryk culture had, I want to end my official part of the tour of the Pazyryk burial mounds and would love to answer any of your questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I would love to answer to my best ability. I am not an archaeologist. I'm an art history enthusiast, but I am absolutely excited just to show you this little bit of art history that is a true hidden gem of the Hermitage and really of art history in general. So few people know about this culture, the Pazyryk culture. So few people know about the fact that not just Egyptians had mummies, but other cultures had mummies, because the body of the priest was basically mummified. And you know, you got to see the oldest carpet in the world, which I find incredible. I see some questions are starting to appear in the chat, and I'm really grateful for it. I want to say that I really appreciate you coming today, even saying hello in the chat. I just see a good comment from Jalil, that you enjoyed this interesting chapter about the Altai. Of course, you are most welcome. You know, I'm always passionate to talk about the Hermitage and art history in general. So thank you for being here. I will give you a couple more minutes to see if you have any more questions for me. Also, if you are still here, feel free to drop in the comments and the chat. What would you like to hear about? I would love, I try to do free art history tours at the end of every month and would love to take requests. What would you like to hear about? What would you like me to cover? I absolutely would love to do that. Also, in the month of November, I will be doing a tour of the history of the Fabergé company with one of the libraries in Illinois, and will definitely invite you to join us for free in my monthly newsletter that is coming on the first Monday of November. So please stay tuned to get that. And yeah, thank you. Let me know what you would like me to cover next. I see another question. Are they looking for additional mounds? Yes, they are. There are still currently excavations going on in the Altai region. And interestingly, right now, they are discovering those mounds both on the Russian territory and on Mongolian territory. So both of these countries are currently having excavations in that region. So yes, there can be more things to be found, which is quite exciting. And I see some more cool comments in the chat. Um, Byzantine history. Yes, I would love to cover that. Also, culture is very interesting too. I have to admit I don't know a ton about it and would love to learn more. Which library in Illinois am I going to um, present for? I am going to present for um, let me see. I am going to present for Wilmette Public Library, and that would be on November 15th. They normally allow me to invite my own guests, so if you follow my monthly email newsletters, then I will definitely invite you. All right. I just also want to say that the replay of this will be available pretty much immediately after we are done. So you're welcome to rewatch this anytime. And I see some more questions. No, I will not be presenting in person. I will be presenting on Zoom. So I will be able to share the Zoom link with you. I see some more questions in the chat, so I'm going to take a second and answer them. I would love to share about the Scythian culture, especially because there is a lot of incredible Scythian jewelry that is available for view, and I know for sure that I have very good virtual views of those things. And I find just Scythian culture truly fascinating, and I would love to share. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Um, as always, I am giving free art history tours on YouTube every last Friday of every month. So join me for my next tour. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on the next tour. I will definitely take your wishes here that you left in the comments into consideration when I choose my next one, and I will let you know exactly what it will be in my monthly newsletter just a little bit over a week from now. So thank you so much again for joining me today, and have a wonderful weekend.